What's up? Hello, it's Carrie again with another episode of Gardenside Chats. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you're well. We're at my garden today, and we are going to go over transplanting cucurbits that are growing in peat pots. So we've already talked about transplanting out of like the kind of normal plastic pots, but today we're going to do peat pots, which is what I've got in my hand here. So it's made out of like pressed peat moss. The plants are growing in it. You can see I'm trying this experiment with old seed this year, so I way overseeded it and I've thinned it to 3 cucumbers. There's more stumps in here. And then ultimately I'll thin this to 1, but for now I've got 3. These are cucumbers. Before I decided I was going to transplant these today, I watered it so they're like really, really wet. I'm not totally sure if you can tell, but it's like really wet. Like it's really easy to tear, it doesn't even like make a noise. So that's an important thing. Water it very well. Even, while you're growing the things in peat pots, you need to water them really well, just like anything. But peat in particular, because the pot in this case will dry out, and so you want to make sure the pot's always kind of moist. And if the pot is kind of dry but the potting mix is kind of moist, the pot itself will wick moisture out of the potting mix to absorb. So you just want to water it real well every day. It's been so rainy that it hasn't been very hard to keep these watered. So yeah, we're going to talk about planting these things, which is just slightly different than planting something else that comes out of a plastic pot. I will say under normal circumstances, normal meaning like taking something out of a plastic pot and putting it in the ground, I would not choose this time of day to do my transplanting because it's like real sunny. It's going to be real sunny for the next 7 or 8 hours. Today's a little bit breezy, and it's a little bit warm today, so like that intense sun, the breeze, and the heat can just make what is a stressful situation transition in something's life even more so. However, I feel like the fact that we're planting these young cucumber plants in peat pots is it's going to be okay to plant them at this time, and I'll go over that when we do the demonstration. And that's simply because I'm not going to take them out of the pot. I'm essentially just planting the pot in the ground, and we'll talk about why you can do that. So I think because of that, the fact that it's sunny and windy and hot is going to be okay because they're used to being out in the sun and the wind already. And honestly, the ground's probably more moist than I've been able to keep the peat pots, so we're all good there. I've already got the bed prepped. I did that yesterday. We put the trellis up yesterday. You don't have to trellis cucumbers. We're also going to maybe do some melons today, but for space efficiency, I'm choosing to trellis them. I've got some carrots and onions over there that we planted with the Gardenside Chat episode. I've got some zinnias that you really can't tell. Don't even show them. Zinnias planted right here that maybe will come up. So anyway, I don't want the long vines of the cucumbers and melons kind of like encroaching on my other garden space. I got kind of a tight garden. I want to go up in this case. So I got my trellis. I got my bed prepped. I weeded. I added amendments yesterday. I added feather meal, and I added kelp meal, and I added some organic fertilizer as well. So these things should be pretty happy. This is, I think, a yellow zucchini. I can't remember, actually, unfortunately. And it's kind of yellowed, as you see. There's actually 2. This older one that's kind of yellowed is due to the fact that it was also grown in a peat pot, and I was reusing potting mix. And so I think it just got a lack of nitrogen. Usually when things get a lack of nitrogen, they kind of start turning this shade of like greenish yellow. So I added, the feather meal is full of nitrogen. The organic fertilizer has some nitrogen in it. So I feel like it should bounce back, but it just is a little bit yellow right now. The reason why I amended so heavily is because cucurbits, things in the cucumber family, squash, melons, cucumbers, pumpkins, they're what we call heavy feeders, so they require lots of nutrients kind of across the board to grow big and healthy. So anyway, fertilized, amended, weeded, kind of raked. I also got my potato fork out and kind of loosened the bed. I kind of stuck the potato fork in and kind of wiggled the soil. My soil is kind of clayey and can be pretty dense, and so squash, cucumbers, they don't have really strong root systems, so I wanted to make it kind of loose for the like the roots to kind of like be able to grow easily. Hopefully you can tell that this is a raised bed. It's definitely very visible right here around the squash. For the same reason that I kind of like loosened up the soil yesterday, you usually want to plant squash and cucumbers and melons on raised beds, or if you don't have raised beds, in like mounds, because they have shallow, wide root systems that aren't like super strong to go through dense soil. So anyway, raised bed. I've got them all laid out, so now we're just ready to plant them. So what the main thing that you want to do is, one, water it. Two, make sure that you totally cover the peat pot, because if there's any amount of the peat pot sticking out of the ground, it will wick soil moisture out from around the plant when like the wind and the sun hit it. So what I usually do is, you can see it's really easy. I'm just pulling like the pot kind of down, like taking that lip, and you can kind of start seeing the roots kind of gingerly kind of breaking it up. And then I'm even just going to put this in the ground, and then I'm going to dig with my Katuchi here a hole that will take the whole pot. Right there, and I'm going to put it right next to my, actually I'm going to move it a little bit, right next to my trellis. There's a worm. All right, so you can see that. And now I'm going to kind of just take some of these clods of soil and kind of break them up around the plant. I want to cover up the potty mix, any of the peat pot that still might, be around the plants. And then once I got that all covered, then I'm going to kind of gingerly kind of smoosh the whole thing down. And then, got my hose on, got a worm scooting by, and then every time you transplant something, you want to water it. So you want to water it really well. So I always turn the hose on pretty low. You can see it's not on all the way. And then I kind of just sit here and count to 10. Okay, so that was 10. My hose kind of leaks, so I'm just going to leave it there. And then I'm going to do the next one down. So I'm planting these cucumbers about every foot or so, but on either, like I'm kind of like going across the trellis. So this is about 2.5 feet away, but there's one in the middle. So I'll do another one. And I'll kind of just let the hose run on the last cucumber that I planted until I'm ready with the new hole. So again, hole big enough for the pot to fit in. Kind of rip away the lip of the peat pot. You can totally pull it off, or you can just kind of peel it back like so. I just put it in the hole too, might as well. I kind of gently smush the pot. Break up some clods, totally cover the potting mix and the peat pot so that moisture isn't whipped away from the plant and their roots. Gingerly smush the soil kind of around. And then I kind of bring the clods back and kind of smooth the whole thing out. Now I'm ready to water this one. So I've got a few more to do, but I think you get the picture. I probably, I have a lot of ants in this garden, and other just kind of like pests. Like, ants aren't pests, but when they are in the quantities that we have them in my garden, they are pests. So once I see that like my cucumbers can start getting true leaves, and and they're getting a little larger, I'll thin them to 1 plant per one of these groups. I'm still kind of banking on some pest predation on my cucumbers, so I just kind of want to play it safe. So I want to water these really well, and then after I get them all planted and all watered, I will go back to the very first one and put my finger in the ground and check to the middle knuckle, stick it in the ground to the middle knuckle to see if my finger is wet at the very tip. And you can see that it's got mud on it, so it's wet, so that means it's wet enough. And then for the next couple of days, I'll just kind of come out here every day. I mean, I try to come to my garden every day anyway, because that's just good practice. And check on these. See if we talked about integrated pest management and scouting for insects on Friday. So I'll be scouting for cucumber beetles, squash bugs, ants, aphids, any sort of pests on them, and so that I can kind of